Hi everyone, my name is Alex Stevens, and one of our customer engagement managers here at NationBuilder. And this is the second part of our key tactics in effective email advocacy series, how to optimize email deliverability and inbox placement. And I am joined by, I'm joined by my colleague, Taylor Pinheiro, who you can also see on the video here. And she's going to be helping manage the chat. Taylor, do you want to say anything about Zoom before we kind of jump in here?
Yeah, sure. So everybody, you're on mute and your camera's off just to minimize distractions. But if you have any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat. It's down at the bottom of your screen. You see the chat button. It'll open up a chat window. You can ping me privately, or you can ping everybody in the group. And as you come up with questions, just pop them in there. Some of them I'll ask Alex so he can go and show you. Some of them I can respond to you in the chat. And then if we don't get to your question, we'll definitely follow up. So feel free to pop anything in there.
Yep. And also, if for folks who didn't make it to the first webinar, that's in no way a prerequisite to it, but we do have a recording of that, which I can share after we finish that up. And we're also recording this, so we'll definitely share those resources out with you after the fact. All right, let's dive in. So last time, just kind of a quick reminder, we chatted about how to send great email, so timing, targeting, and messaging. But who's ever spent a lot of time crafting a blast, doing all of those things, hitting the send button, only to hear a little bit later from a supporter or a teammate that they just never got it? Yeah, it's not a particularly great feeling, and it's definitely happened to me, and you're definitely not alone. About 1 in 5 legitimate emails are never actually delivered to subscribers' inboxes. They're either filtered to their spam folders, or they just simply go missing. In either of those scenarios, either of those outcomes, none of that will actually be reflected in your email stats. So it's not simply a question of are they bouncing, or are they being marked as bad, but whether or not they're actually kind of getting through there it can be a pretty difficult thing to actually look into. And so that's where the kind of topic of email deliverability comes in. Deliverability, it's a way to measure the success at which a sender gets their mailings into subscribers' inboxes, out of the junk or bulk or spam folders, and off mailbox provider block lists. I'll be using that term a lot. A mailbox provider, it's anyone who provides email hosting, and some of those might be internet service provider based, ISP based, such as Comcast, or it might be a free web-based email tool like Gmail, Yahoo, or Hotmail. So just remember that whenever I'm talking about those. And some people use mailbox provider and ISP sort of interchangeably, but I'll be mostly sticking with the former. So first, a little bit of backstory to kind of understand, where we're at and how we got to where we are. So in 1971, the very first email was sent. It was on the very first version of the internet, ARPANET, by a guy named Ray Tomlinson. He was the first person to kind of use an app to talk to someone else on the same network. And just 7 years later, the very first mass email was sent by a gentleman named Gary Thurk, who's developed some notoriety. He was sending to about 400 people on this kind of early version of the internet, and he was selling a product. He was essentially engaged in what would later legally be defined as spam, that is, any unsolicited bulk email. Since then, spam marketing has grown exponentially. Today, estimates are around 65% of all global email traffic is actually spam. And a lot of people, kind of just think that this is how email works. Someone sends an email out of their app box, and it basically lands in the recipient's inbox. And in a lot of ways, that actually is pretty close to what early versions of email actually, that's how they functioned. But this early sort of structure for email was vulnerable to 2 key forms of abuse. One being spam, unsolicited bulk email. The other being malicious impersonation of a trusted sender. So someone essentially trying to represent themselves as a bank or as Apple, or someone trying to fish and get information out of someone. Since those early days, the actual infrastructure of the internet has grown much more complex. And don't worry, you don't need to remember all of these points here. I just want to kind of give you a sense of the overall process. And with that growing complexity and this growth in spam, mailbox providers have developed increasingly sophisticated methods for protecting their users. So that is, at the end of the day, their motivation. But with this growth in sophistication, with the development of new algorithms and ways of kind of trying to tackle issues of spam and malicious hack, there's come some collateral damage, right? Some of these industries, many industries, have actually kind of learned to adapt and kind of figure out how to perform better or send better to kind of help get their emails actually into recipients' inboxes. But as you can see here in the kind of nonprofit advocacy campaign space, the overall inbox placement rate has steadily been declining these over the past 4 years. And just when I say inbox placement rate, this refers to emails that are both getting delivered, right? So they're not bouncing, they are reaching the recipient's mailbox, but they're also landing actually in the inbox itself. They're not landing in the junk folder. And that's really the kind of key thing that we'll be paying attention to here. Before we kind of dive in, I'm going to give you a kind of little outline here. So we're going to start by kind of conceptually simplifying the email delivery process into 3 stages. At each of these stages, mailbox providers use a bunch of secretive algorithms that take into account a range of different factors to determine how to handle each mail that's being sent to the recipients. And after outlining the stages, I'll dig deeper into the key factors for each stage, provide some tips for what you can do to take those to kind of optimize those different factors. And I'll close with 3 kind of big picture strategies that'll help you really at every stage of this delivery funnel. So the first stage is really the gateway. So email comes and it reaches a gateway at the mailbox provider. And I kind of refer to this as the acceptance stage. It's the first line of defense against malicious spam. And at this stage, a provider will take one of 3 actions. They'll either accept the email, they may block the email, which is reflected in your bounce or bad rate, or they may temporarily defer the email. At the next stage is really when filters come in and we start to talk about placement. And so the questions that providers are asking here is, what folder in a recipient's mailbox do we actually want to send this email to? How do we want to categorize it for them? And then the last stage here is, if it kind of gets in, hopefully you've reached the inbox, maybe it's landed in some other folder, a promotional folder or the spam folder. And it's really the rendering stage. And this is when an email provider is going to kind of decide how they want to actually display it, whether they're going to load all the images, add an annotation or something to your email. And we'll talk about that a little bit, but not in too much depth. So stage 1, at this point in the overall process, mailbox providers, they can't actually see the content of incoming email for reasons which are, basically that content could be malicious, so they don't want to actually handle it. And really all they can look at are the email source. So where is the email actually coming from? Whether that source, and then beyond that, whether that source matches a source that's listed on any blacklist. And then there are also technical constraints at this stage, so which you don't really have much control over. So whether the recipient has a full mailbox, or there's just a really high server load. So there are some other things that can get you blocked at this stage, but which don't have to do with the actual trust that they have in the sender. So first kind of key thing here is IP reputation. So email service providers, sometimes known as ESPs, like NationBuilder, MailChimp, anyone who kind of specializes in sending large-scale marketing email to recipients, they send these blasts from bulk email servers. Each of these servers has a physical address, which is called an IP, or Internet Protocol. And in the early days, a lot of people would be sending they'd be essentially sending from a single server. They'd be sending from, what's called a dedicated IP. So it's one person sending from that. So back in the day, this was this question around, can we trust this IP? What is the reputation of it? It was given a decent amount of weight in the overall filtering process. But building the reputation of an IP with mailbox providers actually requires a really high and consistent send volume. And dedicated IPs tend to also expose the person sending from it to a much greater amount of risk, because anything that they do, if they burn their IP, then they're kind of, they're in pretty hot water that's hard to get out of. So gradually ESPs pretty much everyone out there have gradually moved to sending from pools of shared IPs and kind of managing those different IPs, and which allow for a distribution of risk across the entire pool. At the same time, spammers had also learned to hop from IP to IP. So knowing this, mailbox providers too have moved away from prioritizing this sort of IP-based filtering towards methods which combine more variables. One key variable here is the sender's actual email domain, right? So what I'm referring to here is what comes after the @ in the email address that a person is sending from. That's a pretty good indicator of whether or not, like, who is the actual person that's sending this, not just simply like what server is it coming from. Key principle here is if you want to maintain maximum control of your deliverability, make sure that you're always sending from a custom domain. Sending from a free domain like Gmail is a surefire way to actually get your email blocked. And sending from a shared domain, as some folks will do, and you can kind of see this in the example here, means that your good sending practices you won't actually be able to reap. And folks who are, other people who are kind of sending from that same domain might actually end up damaging your own deliverability. This isn't something you should worry about with NationBuilder, but there are some other kind of tools out there where that's a risk. The second rule here, and I won't get too much into the technical stuff here, but is to make sure that you're actually authenticating your email domain. And all that means is it's a process that involves adding some records to wherever you registered, or to your actual host, your domain host, that tell mailbox providers that you are who you say you are. So if you're using NationBuilder, we're hosting your domain, you're all good. We create all those for you. If your domain is being hosted elsewhere, you just want to make sure to follow the instructions on your site to get that authenticated. The link here, which I'll send afterwards, we can provide. But that's another great way to make sure that you actually have control over your own domain reputation. The next big spam kind of question around the source is relates to whether or not the sender has been blacklisted. So blacklists, or DNS blacklists, as some people kind of refer to them, are essentially the secretive self-appointed spam police of the internet. What they do is they operate spam traps, which are email addresses that they've created or adopted, which are not operated by any human and are designed to detect spam or potentially spammy behavior. So the kind of key types of spam traps that are out there are pristine. So that's a new email that's never been operated by a human, but which they essentially float on the internet to see if anyone is going to take up and start sending to. But there's no way it would have ever opted into anything. So that's the next type here is recycled. So these are actually old, inactive email addresses that mailbox providers have just retired and handed over to a DNS blacklist so that they can see if people are going to be sending to these completely dormant emails that no one actually owns anymore. And the last is actually a typo spam trap, which is kind of scary, but these are common domain typos such as @gmail.com or @yahoo.cm, which DNS blacklists have just kind of purchased in bulk and and used to kind of try to gauge people whether or not people are sending to people they shouldn't be. But each of these different traps, they're weighted differently, and they serve different purposes. And they essentially feed into an overall score that they will use to determine whether or not they want to put them on a blacklist. Unfortunately, there's no way to know what email addresses are spam traps, except for the fact that because no one operates them, they'll never actually be opened. All to say, you want to be very careful with your sending behavior. And if your email domain does actually end up on a blacklist, we can work with you to try to get you delisted, but it's a pretty strenuous process. At the end of the day, really the best thing that you can do to avoid spam traps is, never purchase lists, because the people who are, selling emails, the quality there tends to be pretty dubious. They might actually be the types of people who are scraping emails off of websites and, which contain those pristine traps. If you're sending to an old email list that might have recycled spam traps on there for the first time, consider running it through an email validation service like Accurate Append or Bright Verify before you start blasting those folks. And, just in general, practice good list hygiene by periodically scrubbing long dormant email addresses to get get those folks off there. So moving on to the second stage here, which is filtering, or the placement stage. So once your email makes it past the gateway, mailbox providers' actual spam filters kick in. The providers now have access to a much greater kind of swath of data to work with. Chief among these are sender reputation and email content. So we'll start with talking about content, because this is something people generally tend to be pretty focused on. Mailbox providers don't actually, there's a time when people, and there's a lot of misconceptions out there that, there are maybe like specific trigger words, which if you use them automatically, you're gonna land in the spam folder. That's just not the case anymore. The way that it works is they use a long set of kind of bespoke criteria. This is gonna be variant entirely on who the mailbox provider actually is. They generally have their own sort of formula for calculating this, but they use this criteria to calculate an overall spam score. Some criteria might be looking for the language used by spammers and scammers. Others might be looking at the formatting of the email, how the HTML template for the email is actually constructed, links, etc. And then the more content in a given email that matches one of those criteria, the higher your spam score is going to be. So basically each one kind of dings you a little bit. And as that score grows, the more likely it is that it's going to get filtered into the spam folder. By and large, if you're writing quality copy in the first place, which I think most folks in this space are, people who are not as a sector that is not in the business of selling Viagra or whatever, odds are you don't really need to worry that much about the content side of things. You're probably not going to accidentally send up a ton of red flags, and if you do, if there happens to be one ding here or there, it really isn't anything to sweat. That said, here's some of the most common mistakes that I've seen in the nonprofit and advocacy space on the content filtering side of things. High image to text ratio. So that shouldn't ISPs or the actual mailbox providers can't read images, so that which spammers understand, so they might try to use that as a workaround. So if more than 50% of your newsletter is just an image, just don't do that. Be very careful of that. Another one is link shorteners. So this is something I see a lot of folks will do. They'll send out a tweet that they suggest that their followers tweet out, or or whatever, and in that tweet might be a bit.ly link or something like that. Unfortunately, those link shorteners are actually common ways that kind of malicious scammers will use to hide dangerous links. And so if you have that, that's going to send up major red flags for email providers. Another one is broken links and kind of messed up HTML. So just make sure their email is coded correctly if you're doing something super custom with that, and make sure that you're always testing each of those links before you send out a blast. And just in general, test before you send. NationBuilder has a built-in spam scores tool, which you can look at. There are others, if you're like super cautious or you have a lot of concerns around this, you can double check it with a third-party tool. I like Mail Tester, but that's sort of the main way to kind of avoid this. At the end of the day, far more important though than the content of your emails is your sender reputation. So as a sender, you'll gradually acquire reputation as you send out mailings over time. Mailbox providers basically believe that historical performance predicts future results. So making this overall sender reputation really one of the most important determinants of whether or not your email is going to end up getting filtered to junk. So it is king. Actually, according to one study, 83% of email delivery failures are caused by reputation problems with content and a lot of these other factors kind of falling into secondary and third places. 4 key factors that every mailbox provider is going to look at as they determine your sender reputation. The complaint rate, obviously, if people are going and out of their way to mark you as spam, that's what you see in your spam rate, that's going to be a major kind of blow to your sender reputation if they see that over and over and over again. Hard bounces, so if you're repeatedly sending to bad email addresses, and whoever you're sending from doesn't automatically mark them as bad, which it does in NationBuilder, so you don't need to worry about that. But if you are, for whatever reason, opting people back in, that can be a big blow to your sender reputation. Spam traps, which I discussed, and also authentication, to the extent that it allows you to control a lot of your reputation here, is also important. One thing a lot of people don't realize is that mailbox providers are also now increasingly looking at the recipient engagement with your emails. So some of those metrics are visible, like your open rate or your click-through rate. Other engagement metrics, which they absolutely have access to, are how much time is someone like reading your email, if they're going into the spam folder and actually marking you as saying this is not spam. Those are other things that can benefit your reputation, which you don't necessarily have visibility in. But I'm going to dig a little bit into this question around engagement and how that impacts placement here. So, essentially, if they see that a recipient isn't interested in your emails, for that individual recipient, they're going to start just moving those emails into the spam folder. If they see this at scale, it may actually begin to impact your placement for other recipients. So kind of quick case study here. A few years back, ReturnPath, who studies a lot of email deliverability and provides consulting services, they compared 7 major brands' overall email campaign stats for one month to the performance of emails that they sent out, which were targeted at inactive subscribers. So when I talk about inactive, everyone's going to have their own definition of that. Each one of these folks did, and we'll talk about that more later. But a common definition, so you can just kind of have in your head, inactive might be an old subscriber who hasn't opened an email blast in the last 6 months. An active might be someone who's opened a blast in the last 6 months, or they signed up during that time, right? And as you can see, so here is red, the results in red of the open rates. The overall open rate is going to vary a lot between these different brands, but you can see it's relatively healthy, around 20 to 25%. But when the brands actually targeted a series of emails to their inactives, which is the gray bars that you can see here, it dropped, the open rate dropped significantly down to 10% or so. Specifically, if you look at brand D, there were virtually no opens when they sent emails out to those inactive subscribers. Next, they compared the ISP marked spam rate. So that's just the percent of emails the mailbox provider filtered into the spam folder. And you can see that in general, the number of emails landing in spam when overall for their campaigns are actually pretty respectable. Those are the little red bars. But in contrast, the campaigns targeted at inactive saw 3 to 5 times more emails getting filtered into the spam folder. And again, if you look at D, so remember they had like the lowest open rate of when sending to their inactives. And as you can see, you can probably guess why, right? Because all of those emails were getting filtered into the spam folder. And you can also, one other thing to note here is that with each subsequent send that D made to these inactives, that ISP marked spam rate continued to close. So every time they sent a bunch of emails to their inactive folks, more and more, because the provider was seeing that, more and more of those emails are actually getting filtered into the spam folder. So while it's common to get a lot of pressure from maybe senior staff or other teammates, just cast a broad net, and the numbers will shake out, and eventually people are going to start opening. The fact is that for many of your long inactive subscribers, they're not going to come out of the woodworks and suddenly start opening, because the fact is there's a good chance that those emails are already landing in their spam folder. And this is my own inbox, and you can see these are examples of there's some totally legit spam stuff in here, but there's also a number of sends which I myself intentionally subscribe to, and then because I don't check my personal email all that much, they've eventually just started to get moved into the spam folder. So here's the punchline. If you're sending campaigns to inactive subscribers, your inbox placement can suffer. And focusing on active subscribers at the end of the day is more effective, and over time will result in more people opening. Not merely a higher open rate, because obviously if you're sending to a smaller universe of people who are more engaged, your open rate is going to be higher. But actually more and more people will start opening, because the mailbox providers will see that you're sending to these active subscribers, people are engaging really well, and emails which may have previously been landing in the recipient's spam folders will actually start landing in the inbox overall. So now just some brief notes on rendering. So this is the stage where mailbox providers decide how they want to display an email to their recipient. Technically, there's also the stage where they figure out how they're going to style it, but we're not going to get into that part of things here. So in addition to hiding images or adding disclaimers, as you can see at the bottom here, many mailbox providers are also starting to flag emails which are missing authentication records. So this is an example here where someone has clearly grossly configured their email so that now that because it looks like a risky or potentially someone's trying to spoof or pretend to be a taste card, they've actually put a question mark and a red unlock symbol next to their name. And even with people who are sending from kind of generic white labels, they'll also mark that there. It's not going to have a direct impact on whether or not it lands in the inbox, but it may impact recipients' trust when they see it that it's getting sent from an unfamiliar domain. And decreased trust leads to decreased engagement, and where it goes from there. So punchline here is, there's not a whole lot you can control in terms of how they display it, but do make sure that you are kind of creating and authenticating your email if you want to have the most sort of like custom white labeled experience. Okay, now we're going to get into the three core deliverability strategies that are going to really help your at kind of every stage of the sending funnel. Okay, the first is, and we can probably expect that I was going to say this, consent is key. You need to have supporters' permission to send emails in the frequency and subject desired. In the advocacy space, this can be complicated by the use of petitions for email acquisition, right? Folks, we've learned that, a petition can also be treated as a as like a sign up, but the reality is, for some people, they're going in, they're really fired up about an issue. They maybe didn't really pay attention to the disclaimer, they signed the petition, and then they're surprised to start getting emails. I think that that's increasingly being less the case, because folks are now familiar with, I sign a petition, I'm probably going to get emails from the person whose petition I signed. But there is one kind of situation where I think this is particularly vulnerable. Which is when you're actually dealing with joint petitions. So this is a popular tactic, and increasingly so, where you essentially have different organizations that are partnering up, and when they push a bunch of people to a petition, and then they get back all of depending on how many signatures they're actually able to generate, they'll get back new email addresses from whoever is hosting this joint petition, in the amount that they were able to contribute. This particular example here is, I think, highlights where this can get really risky. So the petition page is hosted by a third party. It's completely generic in its branding, and the actual campaign had 22 different campaign partners, right? And the opt-in disclaimer, which is pretty buried down here towards the end, I mean, you can read it here, right? By signing this petition, you agree to receive email updates from some of the below participating organizations, no more than 4, and you can opt out later, right? So this isn't simply a situation where someone is signing like a joint petition with like 4 organizations, their brand is right on here. In this case, they're actually signing a petition where it's like, I don't know, could be anyone, and no one's going to read through the entire list of organizations. And so there's a good chance that, the people's intent to start receiving emails, sorry, I just got briefly distracted. People's initial intent to receive emails is going to be pretty low, right? So the lower initial opt-in intention that people have, the greater the risk that they're going to actually complain and mark one of your emails as spam. Hold on, sorry. Okay, I was getting a little bit of feedback there. Right, so, and the more complaints that you get, as we talked about before, the more damage is going to do your sender reputation. So if you are, even though this is like, nominally within the scope of like people being able to, of a kind of opt-in disclaimer, which is like fair legally, it may not be the greatest practice in terms of managing your own deliverability and getting stuff through. So if you are doing this, just be very careful. Make sure that when you send that initial email to folks who come in through a joint petition, that you're very clear in reintroducing them to the, telling them why they're receiving this, the campaign, introducing them to your brand and what you're about. And if people aren't biting, and probably also do that in a small amount to see if rather than just sending to all those folks at once, to kind of test the waters. And if folks aren't biting after a while, it's probably a good idea to actually just call a loss there and get them off your list, lest they kind of end up poisoning the overall well. Cool. So the next kind of big principle here is that you need to plan for list decay, right? So just a little anecdote here from the Hillary Clinton campaign. At the end of her 2008 campaign, she had 2.5 million email addresses. When they booted the campaign back up 7 years later, her team found with some surprise that only less than around 100,000 of those email addresses still worked, right? So this is just to kind of say that even the big players in the space like make mistakes and don't necessarily realize to what extent this is a reality. In fact, around 25 to 30% of a given email list expires every year. So keeping that in the back of your head, and when I say expires, I mean someone has either maybe they've switched jobs, and so their work email isn't a thing anymore, or maybe they finally were like, Hotmail, this I'm gonna like upgrade to the modern era, and they switch over to Gmail, or some of those. So it's maybe a question of like some emails actually just going bad, and you'll kind of see those bounces, but it also might just be people abandoning emails, moving to other ones, and so no longer opening at all. And so those people, those inactives, those people who aren't opening, they need attention too, right? Being more selective about to whom you send your email, or even no longer sending to someone who hasn't asked you to stop may seem to go against common sense, but in the world of email, these changes can go a long way to ensuring your mail is delivering to an inbox and not to a spam folder. So the kind of first strategy, in light of that principle, is to create a sunset policy. An effective sunset policy, it's a customizable solution that can really challenge and address many of the problems we've been discussing here. It plays the role of what I call like preventative maintenance. And essentially, it involves you determining, at what point in a subscriber's lifetime they're kind of closing out, and they've reached the end of their day and need to be retired in one way or another. So here's the kind of like the three main steps for establishing a sunset policy. First, you need to define what an inactive recipient is to your community, and this is going to vary a lot from organization to organization, primarily based on how many emails you send in a given period of time, right? The less emails that you send, very likely you're gonna want to have or allow for a longer period of kind of inactivity than folks who are sending on a really, really regular basis, for whom if people aren't engaging or biting, you might want to actually start sunsetting them sooner. You also want to determine how long it's appropriate to send messages to a recipient who's inactive. So like how long are you like, okay, someone's gone inactive, how much time do you want to continue sending to them before it's getting into risky territory? And then you need to decide really what you do with those inactives. Are you going to just silently let inactives leave? So maybe suppress them from the emails that you're sending out, or actually just go all the way and fully go in and batch unsubscribe them? Or if you want to try to send them a final reactivation email to try to get them back into an engaged state with the organization. So this is just sort of, example of like some sunset schedules. Maybe it's recipients of daily emails who haven't opened in 3 weeks. Maybe it's recipients of weekly emails who haven't opened in 3 months. Recipients of monthly emails who haven't opened in 6 months. In general, though, if someone hasn't opened for a year, that's a pretty risky place, and I would definitely not recommend doing that. But beyond that, it's really up to you to kind of decide what this window is, and how stringent you want to be in identifying those inactive recipients, and through a process that you can kind of see here how you do this in NationBuilder, how you filter for those folks using the email or open email blast from filters, and then kind of specifying your date range. So if you do decide to go the direction of trying to send a final reactivation email, trying to win, and when I talk about reactivation campaigns, some people will call these, it's also known as a re-engagement campaign, or a reconfirmation campaign, or a win-back campaign. So all those words are sort of interchangeable. It's a fair thing to try to do. You do need to kind of weigh the considerations basically around like how valuable that email is to you. What is its actual maybe worth? And versus how much effort is it going to take for me to actually send these campaigns, or how much risk there is potentially in sending a reactivation campaign to people who have been inactive for a really long time, knowing that could have an impact on your placement. That said, I've definitely seen and have looked at a lot of data that shows that reactivation campaigns can be effective for when done right and done in a kind of diligent way. The basic process is you need to, like we said before, define who these inactive people are. Then, if you want to run a good one, you want to actually figure out if you can segment those inactives, right? So is there some sort of, shared trait that they have in common? Like if you notice perhaps that they all came in from a given petition that they signed, right? Or maybe there's some sort of, you can segment them around, how long it's been since they, initially opted into your email program. Or if you're an organization that has kind of a subscription preference management portal set up, so essentially a way for folks to say like, I want to receive emails about this issue, or I want to receive this amount of emails. That might be another way to segment them. But you want to basically figure out how and do whatever you can to figure out how to personalize this communication that you're going to send them, because as for folks who went to the last webinar know, personalization really is absolutely critical, both to people opening, but also more importantly to them actually re-engaging with the campaign. And all of these data points that you have on someone are ways that you might be able to help remind them about why it was that they signed up to receive emails from you in the first place. The second step here is really just designing the campaign, designing that email or 2 emails that you're planning on sending them. This is super critical. It's worth spending a good amount of time on this, because you should think of this as your last ditch effort to save these subscribers. So think about the hook, right? If there's personalization, if there's something you can say that reminds them about why they signed up in the first place, something that brings it in, and then you need to think about what is the actual call to action, right? So are you asking them to actually reconfirm and say like, yes, I want to continue receiving emails from you, and in which case the expectation is that if they don't reconfirm, you're just going to unsubscribe them altogether. And that's because they didn't take that action. Is it an opt-out ask? Are you sending them like, hey, if you want to continue receiving emails from us, or if you don't want to continue receiving emails from us, here's a link, you can unsubscribe now. That might be a good option, although it does mean that you potentially are risking continuing to have those folks be a part of in the list. So if you are going that direction, you're probably going to want to, for folks who don't open the email at all, retire those folks. But for folks who do open the email, those are the people that you are now kind of continuing to send to. Or something I've seen some people do, which I think is pretty cool, is give people an offer to down subscribe, right? So say, it's a really busy season, let people be like, hey, if you, click here and we won't send you an email for the next 4 months, or click here and we'll only, instead of sending you these regular updates, we're going to only send you an email, like the most important emails once a month or once every 2 months. And that can be a good way to actually get people excited, but mix it up, right? Like this, who's sending it, the actual subject line that they're receiving, make it look different, because these people are not, they haven't been opening emails. So if something that stands out and makes them, see it as something that is not the standard fare, is really important there. And then lastly, you're actually going to, you send and monitor, right? So, as a general rule of thumb, you should really, send in small chunks, because again, this is a risky pool of recipients. And there may be, some pretty negative, responses from you. So, send in small chunks and really keep an eye on that complaint rate. If you see it, spiking, or you see that like after, a few days or, a week, no one has opened the email, then, it may not be, you may need to figure out how to recalibrate your strategy. And at the end of it, for the folks who you haven't been able to act, give them time, because it could take a little bit longer than your normal recipients to open, but you should go in and purge those folks from your list. Oh God. So, kind of just to tie things off here, instead of, fighting to keep old subscribers, fighting to keep those people around, if you really want to ensure that your emails are landing in the inbox, that all of the kind of value that you're providing and all the work they're putting into it is really getting paid off, use a combination of, win-backs or reactivation campaigns, develop a good sunset policy to kind of help maintain your list hygiene and address all the spam traps and all the other issues we discussed. And at the end of the day, find new opt-ins, because we know that your list is at a certain point there's nothing you can do 25% every year. Make sure that you're constantly replenishing your list, so you're not just kind of doing slow damage to your reputation over time, and it will pay off. Cool. And so that is all. It's got a little time for questions here. Taylor, are there any you want to bubble up? Oh my God.
Here we go.
Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Good. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much. We had a couple questions come in the chat that we I sent links about, but just so if people haven't been in there, a question about where the built-in spam checker is in NationBuilder. So it's in your email blast. As you're creating it, right before preview, there's a little spam score button. So you can click on that and that will show you your spam score. And it'll also tell you why you have that score. So it'll tell you there's like more images to text, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And then
I will also say too, so that's a great easy way to do it. Again, I wouldn't overthink the content stuff, but the mail-tester.com, if you really want to get like super granular breakdown of like all of the different kind of like codes and have a little bit more explanation, that it's a free tool, which is also pretty good.
Totally. And then we had another question about just how you engage people who are inactive. And so you covered that actually right after the question was asked. So I put a link in there also about our unsubscribe page where you can use tags to have people subscribe to like different kinds of newsletters so they're not getting all of your content. And then the one question, Alex, that just came in about the length of a subject line. Is that an issue at all for inbox placement? Is it something that you have thought about?
So it's, I mean, I've read a lot of, research, I've read some studies out there where, I mean, it's definitely something I think about, but it's less of a deliverability question in terms of how it's going to get in than it is a question about, what's going to actually drive engagement. So if you've got like a really, really long email subject line, in a lot of viewers, that's just going to get cut off. So, generally, I think keeping it tight is a good rule of thumb. And especially if you're running, reactivation campaigns, these are people who are not reading your emails, right? So especially with those, keeping those really, really succinct is going to be important. Yeah.
And what about, we just had another question about like putting like emojis in the subject line. So I feel like I just started seeing this in my own inbox. Have you had an experience with that? Like, do you recommend it or?
Oh yeah. I mean, I do it all the time. I don't actually have the exact numbers, but their return path actually did some analysis of emojis, and they found that they are very effective. But with anything, that doesn't have an impact on placement because emojis actually are Unicode, so that they are part of a kind of standard universal syntax. They're going to appear differently in different email clients, like depending on who's viewing them, but those are essentially treated as standard characters.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And then Alex, I don't know if you can open the chat and see something from Craig about his specific error he gets on mailtester.com. I don't know if that's not familiar, we can definitely look that up and get back.
Yeah, I mean, so it sounds like something to do with authentication, but the details there, if when you go to the actual kind of place in the where it's listed in NationBuilder and it says not your domain's not hosted by NationBuilder, it should show you some records and check to see that those are installed. But that might be something that we'd look into. My guess is I'm always a little bit like Mail Tester. I think is a good tool, but there's certain things that like always end up getting flagged there. So I wouldn't be so concerned, but I do think it may be something to follow up with.
Yeah, I mean, I can ping support on that,
Yeah.
Craig. And then Alex, do you recommend just batch up unsubscribing people who haven't opened an email in the past year?
Yes. I mean, I think what I would say is that like this comes into, and this is why I don't want to be like super prescriptive here, because it is going to vary a lot based on, the organization. So if the question you want to ask is like, how much email do you send? Like, is it reasonable that someone, like if they signed up like a year ago but you only send like, which you should never do, but like if you're only sending like 6 emails a year or something like that, then like, it's probably reasonable to assume that like if there's a chance those folks just haven't opened those emails. But yeah, I think the thing you need to do is like basically look at like the size of your list and like, if you want to hazard a reactivation campaign or like test that with like a small subset of those people, I think that that's a reasonable thing to do. But if you feel confident about the amount of people that like the rate at which you're replenishing your list, and aren't, don't feel that that's going to take a major hit, then I would actually, I think it tends to be easier to just, exclude those folks or opt them out. suppressing them can be a risk too. Like if you are sending to mostly mostly active people, if you don't go and unsubscribe those folks, eventually like you might have an intern who comes in and like sends to everyone, and suddenly there's, you know, mailbox providers are going to see this massive spike in like, you know, spam traps or a bunch of emails that are suddenly, you know, hitting and going to the spam folders. And so that can end up doing actually like more damage than you would like.
And do you have like a recommendation how many emails you should be sending to people? Is there like a too many? I know anecdotally, I've heard like more is better. You get better results, but
Yeah.
what do you recommend?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, so like, so in general, I do actually think that I would err on, I am more concerned about people sending too few emails than sending too many emails. So, you know, having like a consistent, you know, volume is actually really good. I think the thing you just want to look at, right, is if you're suddenly sending a ton of emails and you know, you just got to keep an eye on the complaint rate. And if you suddenly see like a huge, you know, dramatic spike, if you want to start ramping up and sending more emails and you see a big spike on like of people unsubscribing or marking spam, then that could be an indication that you are sending too many emails. On the deliverability side, you know, this is really where you want to look at like your open rate. And like if you feel that the overall performance of your emails isn't doing well and you're sending a ton of emails, that, you know, is a good sign that something about your email campaigning should probably change. And you might want to sort of figure out how to like focus on those really active people. Because again, if you're sending a ton of emails but a bunch of those emails are going to the spam folder, that's just going over time going to do more and more damage to your reputation. But in general, you want to keep it consistent. That's the one other thing I'll say on the deliverability side. So if you haven't sent an email in a really long time, or, you know, you suddenly start, you know, you normally send, you know, 2 emails or, you know, 6 emails a month or whatever, and then suddenly you send, you know, to a massive list and you're like sending every day, that's going to be a red flag as well for mailbox providers. Or, you know, you haven't sent in a really long time, and then you just start. Those kind of new domains or massive, like, you know, spiky kind of sending behavior is something that can, you know, end up being a ding, or might result in them, if not like punishing you, just, you know, throttling and deferring the emails. So they may actually try to, you know, throttle, see how people engage with the email before they actually accept the rest of the email. So that's what, when we talk about deferral, that's what that means, and what can sometimes result in really spiky kind of behavior.
Awesome.
And I saw, oh yeah, go ahead, sorry.
Oh, just one quick question from Rebecca about how to, if we're going to do a webinar on how to authenticate your email. And actually, we're starting something new next week. And it's called NationBuilder Live. And so it's going to be a daily 10 a.m. webinar for 30 minutes. You can come and ask us questions. Each day is a different section of the control panel. And Wednesday is communication. So I'm putting the link in there. You can RSVP for Wednesday's webinar, and we'll go over how to authenticate your email and set up your broadcasters. So we will definitely do it in there. And then, did you see the question about?
Yeah, I saw Becca's question. Yeah, so, I mean, so if you're, I mean, the thing, so I guess, I mean, it's a question is sort of like how, in what situation you want to be using those links. Like if it's just a link to like a page or whatever, you should always just hyperlink, you know, the text itself rather than like including, you know, a link. Because, you know, if you're sending, you know, from NationBuilder, if you're sending from anyone, there are already built-in tools to track whether or not someone's clicking it. So there's no reason, you know, to use Bitly as a way of, you know, tracking the performance of a campaign, right? But if you are doing it in this sort of context where it's if you're trying to like kind of provide people with a social media prompt that includes, you know, a link, what I would actually recommend, I don't really, I mean, I generally try to like assume that we can't outsmart mailbox providers because they're very smart. I mean, there might be some like new, you know, link shortener that like kind of gets around it, but like I would kind of steer away from. And actually what I would do instead is there's a tool called sharelinkgenerator.com. What you can do with sharelinkgenerator.com is basically go in and create like the text of a tweet or a Facebook post or what have you that someone would be sharing, and you can actually in that link you can include a hyperlink to the page, right? And then so it'll generate just, you know, a kind of complex hyperlink, which you can then like in the like suggested tweet text, just hyperlink that whole tweet text and just leave out the URL that's at the end. And it will already be compressed, right? Because they won't see the full URL. They'll just see like the text of that. And when they click it, that URL will be included in the tweets that when they're pushed over to Twitter.
And you can tweet, everyone can tweet longer now, right?
Yeah, but like, you know, I can see like a situation, you know, if you're sending out an email and you've got like the URL you're trying to point people to is really, really long, and like having that whole thing in there just kind of looks ugly and cumbersome. So, you know, if you want to kind of just like clean up the look of the email using kind of a share link generator can be a good way to do that.
Totally. And you can also, I mean, experimenting with it is great as well. Rebecca just posted in the chat that she has more luck not using hyperlinks and just having the link on there. So, you know, if your constituents and your supporters respond to that better, then great.
Yeah, it's definitely something to test, honestly. I mean, I actually haven't, you know, tested that, but I could see that being the case, right? Because it looks, they actually can see the full, you know, the full thing right there, and so that might actually provide more trust and more kind of willingness to, you know, click or to kind of grab that text and tweet it out than it would otherwise.
Yeah, Tom, I think everyone can tweet 280 characters as of like yesterday or the day before.
Yeah, it's I don't really know why they did that, but I do think that's a thing. I've definitely seen it. I don't know. I mean, it's maybe they're like kind of gradually like betaing it with some people, but I think it is a thing now.
Yeah.
Terrible thing. Cool. Well, if no one else has any questions, then we can wrap this up. I will be sending again everyone a follow-up email once we get a chance to get this recorded and to get the awkward long silence while I was waiting for everyone to join at the front chopped off. So hopefully we'll be able to get that out to you by tomorrow. But if not, just keep an eye out. It is coming. And if folks want slides or anything like that, I can provide those as a link to those in the email as well. Thanks, everyone.